The 7th century, Arabia's vast deserts. One man, one vision, it changed everything. This is the story of Islam, a faith born from revelation. Its impact, global cultural revolutions, intellectual awakenings, and a destiny tied forever to medieval Europe and later to the whole Western civilization. But Islam didn't just shape a region, it reshaped the world. From the bustling streets of Baghdad to the libraries of Cordoba, its influence sparked golden ages of art, science, and philosophy. However, it wasn't only a story of peace and progress. It's a tale of conquests, alliances, and clashes that left an indelible mark on medieval Europe. This journey takes us deep into the heart of history, where faith and power collided to shape the course of civilizations. Yet, in today's world, the echoes of this history are everywhere, on the news, in political debates, and in the narratives that pit Islam against the West and West against the Islam. We witnessed horrible terrorist attacks, burning Middle East, a horrible war in Gaza, etc. Violence like an eternal cycle. But here's the danger, falling into the trap of oversimplified propaganda from either side that can blind us to the complexities of the past that shape our present. That's why this video goes beyond surface-level takes, offering a deep, unbiased exploration of Islam's history, from its origins to its interactions with medieval Europe, to give you the context needed to truly understand modern conflicts. However, there is a problem. How to avoid falling into the same trap of propaganda and biased views when studying the history of Islam. How we will deal with those obstacles, and what is the best way to do it. In this video, we will commit to an unbiased and academically rigorous approach. Our exploration of the history of Islam will be built on the foundation of thorough scholarship, drawing insights from both Western and Islamic historians to provide a balanced and nuanced perspective. We will reference the works of renowned modern historians such as Fred Donner, Jonathan Berkey, and Hugh Kennedy, alongside Islamic scholars like Tariq Ramadan and Wael Halak, to ensure credibility and depth. Fred Donner is a scholar of Islam and professor of Near Eastern history at the University of Chicago. He has published several books about early Islamic history. For our video, we plan to use citations and quotes from the following key works by Fred Donner, which are foundational in the study of early Islamic history. Muhammad and the Believers, At the Origins of Islam from 2010. This book provides a nuanced perspective on the formation of the early Islamic community, focusing on the inclusivity of Muhammad's movement and its appeal to monotheistic believers beyond just Arab tribes. Quotes from this book will help illustrate the social and religious aspects of Islam's emergence. The Early Islamic Conquests from 1981. This work examines the early military expansions of Islam and explores the administrative and logistical factors behind their success. Citations from this book will help contextualize the political and military strategies of the early Islamic Empire and their impact on neighboring civilizations. Narratives of Islamic Origins, The Beginnings of Islamic Historical Writing from 1998. Donner analyzes the evolution of early Islamic historiography, providing a critical view of how Islamic narratives were constructed and their purposes. Quotes from this book will be used to highlight the challenges of interpreting early Islamic history through available sources. Jonathan Berkey is a historian specializing in Islam and the Middle East. He is currently professor of history at Davidson College. He received a bachelor's degree from Williams College and his doctorate from Princeton University. In 2003, he was given the Albert Hourani Book Award by the Middle Eastern Studies Association for his book The Formation of Islam, Religion and Society in the Near East, 600 to 1800. This book explores the development of Islamic thought and society within the broader context of Near Eastern religious traditions. It provides a balanced perspective on the transition from late antiquity to the Islamic period. Another book that we will use is Popular Preaching and Religious Authority in the Medieval Islamic Near East for 2001. This work examines the role of popular preaching in shaping religious authority, providing valuable insights into the cultural and societal dynamics of the medieval Islamic world. Hugh Nigel Kennedy is a British medievalist and academic. He specializes in the history of the early Islamic Middle East, Muslim Iberia, and the Crusades. From 1997 to 2007, he was Professor of Middle Eastern History at the University of St Andrews. Since 2007, he has been Professor of Arabic at School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. His most relevant books are The Prophet and the Age of the Caliphates, the Islamic Near East from the 6th to the 11th century from 1986. There are updated editions available. This book is a foundational text for understanding the political, social, and economic history of the Islamic world during its formative centuries. It offers detailed insights into the Rashidun, Umayyad, and Abbasid caliphates, making it invaluable for explaining the early expansion and governance of the Islamic world. The Great Arab Conquests, How the Spread of Islam Changed the World We Live in from 2007, a highly engaging account of the early Islamic conquests. This book provides vivid descriptions of key battles, strategies, and the cultural implications of these events. It is particularly useful for discussing the rapid territorial expansion of the Islamic world. When Baghdad ruled the Muslim world, the rise and fall of Islam's greatest dynasty from 2004. This work focuses on the Abbasid Caliphate, exploring the golden age of Islamic culture and science under their rule. It is excellent for discussing the intellectual and cultural achievements that connected the Islamic world to medieval Europe. Tariq Ramadan is a Swiss Muslim academic, philosopher and writer. He was a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at St Antony's College, Oxford, and the Faculty of Theology and Religion, University of Oxford. He is a senior research fellow at Doshisha University in Japan and is also a visiting professor at the Université Mundiapolis in Morocco. His most important works are In the Footsteps of the Prophet, Lessons from the Life of Muhammad from 2007. This book provides a nuanced exploration of the life and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, focusing on the spiritual, ethical, and social dimensions of his message. It's valuable for discussing Muhammad's role as a religious leader and reformer, connecting his life to the broader themes of Islamic history. The Quest for Meaning, Developing a Philosophy of Pluralism from 2010. While not strictly a historical text, this book examines the philosophical and ethical foundations of Islam, providing insights into how Islamic principles influenced cultural and intellectual traditions in both the Islamic world and medieval Europe. Western Muslims and the Future of Islam from 2004. This book explores the historical and contemporary relationship between Islam and the West. Although it focuses on modern Muslims in Western societies, it provides valuable historical context for understanding the roots of interaction and tension between Islamic and European civilizations. Islam, The Essentials, from 2017, a concise overview of Islamic beliefs, practices, and historical developments. This book offers a foundational understanding of Islam's core tenets, which can be helpful in contextualizing its history and evolution. Wael Halak is the Avalon Foundation Professor in the Humanities at Columbia University, where he has been teaching ethics, law, and political thought since 2009. He is considered a leading scholar in the field of Islamic legal studies and has been described as one of the world's leading authorities on Islamic law. His most important works are The Origins and Evolution of Islamic Law from 2005, This book is a foundational text for understanding the development of Islamic jurisprudence. It explores how Islamic law emerged and evolved in the early centuries, including its institutional and societal impacts, which will be crucial for discussing the Abbasid Caliphate and Islamic governance. Sharia, Theory, Practice, Transformations, from 2009. This comprehensive work examines the theoretical underpinnings and practical applications of Islamic law across history. It provides valuable insights into the integration of Sharia into medieval Islamic societies, as well as its relationship with political and social structures. The Impossible State, Islam, Politics and Modernity's Moral Predicament, from 2012. While primarily focused on the modern period, this book offers a critical analysis of the historical framework of Islamic governance, contrasting it with modern state structures. Its exploration of the moral and ethical dimensions of Islamic systems is relevant for understanding historical Islamic governance, authority, continuity, and change in Islamic law, from 2001. This book delves into the historical continuity and adaptations of Islamic legal systems. It is invaluable for exploring the intellectual dynamism of Islamic law during the Islamic Golden Age and its influence on medieval societies, including interactions with European legal and cultural frameworks. We will also use some analyses of primary sources, early texts, chronicles, and archaeological findings. Alongside contemporary research, we aim to separate historical fact from myth or propaganda. This approach will allow us to embrace the complexities of history without oversimplification, offering a comprehensive and impartial journey through Islam's rise, its intricate interactions with medieval Europe, and its enduring influence on the world. Now that our method and sources are explained, it is time to move straight to our subject. We will begin our journey with a short overview of history of Arabia until early 7th century. The Arabian Peninsula, stretching over 3 million square kilometers, is one of the most arid regions in the world. Its harsh climate, marked by extreme heat and scarcity of water, shaped the lives of its inhabitants. The vast deserts, such as the Rub al-Khali empty quarter, were interspersed with oases that served as vital lifelines for trade and settlement. This unforgiving environment demanded resilience and adaptability, qualities that became hallmarks of Arabian culture. Aside from the mentioned historians in the chapter sources and literature, we will also draw on the knowledge and insights from some other prominent scholars in the field. One of them is Marshall Hodgson, who was an American historian and scholar of Islamic studies best known for his pioneering work on Islamic civilization and his contributions to world history. He was a professor at the University of Chicago, where he developed a year-long course on Islamic civilizations. In his book, The Venture of Islam, he observes, "The geography of Arabia created a fragmented society where survival depended on the ability to navigate vast distances and endure the merciless desert. The isolation of its communities fostered a fierce sense of independence, but also a deep reliance on tribal bonds. The northern regions of Arabia were more fertile, benefiting from proximity to the Levant, while the southern regions, particularly Yemen, were known for their agricultural wealth and maritime trade. The central desert areas, including the Najd and Hijaz, were less hospitable, relying heavily on camel caravans for economic sustenance. Arabian society was predominantly tribal, with loyalty to one's clan, Asabiya, serving as the foundation of identity and governance. Tribes functioned as both social units and political entities, providing protection, justice, and economic support to their members. Within each tribe, honor and reputation were paramount, often defended through blood feuds that could last generations. Karen Armstrong is a British author and commentator of Irish Catholic descent, known for her books on comparative religion. In her book, Muhammad, a Prophet for Our Time, she explains, in a land without centralized authority, the tribe was both lawgiver and protector. The individual survival depended entirely on the collective strength of the tribe. The Bedouins, the nomadic tribes of the desert, embodied the quintessential Arabian way of life. They herded camels and goats, navigating the harsh terrain with unmatched skill. Their oral poetry, known as qasida, celebrated themes of bravery, love, and tribal loyalty. This poetic tradition not only preserved their history but also became a medium for political expression and rivalry. Sedentary Arabs, by contrast, lived in towns and cities, such as Mecca and Yathrib. Later it will be known as Medina, where trade and commerce flourished. These urban Arabs were more cosmopolitan, interacting with diverse cultures through trade routes that connected Arabia to the Byzantine Empire, Sasanian Persia, and the Indian Ocean. Arabia's strategic position made it a vital link in global trade networks. The overland caravan routes carried goods such as frankincense, myrrh, spices, and textiles from southern Arabia to the Levant and beyond. Mecca's location along these trade routes turned it into a bustling commercial hub. The Quraysh tribe, which controlled Mecca, dominated the caravan trade. Their influence extended beyond economics. They served as intermediaries between various tribes, leveraging their control over the Kaaba to solidify their power. The Quraysh also organized seasonal markets, such as the Ukaz Fair, where traders, poets, and diplomats gathered. Fred Donner, in his book The Early Islamic Conquests, notes the Quraysh's economic dominance rested on their ability to mediate between the sedentary and nomadic populations of Arabia, ensuring both the security of trade routes and the flow of goods. The southern Arabian region of Yemen, known in antiquity as Arabia Felix, Fortunate Arabia, was a center of agricultural and maritime wealth. The kingdoms of Saba, Himyar, and Qataban thrived on the export of incense and spices, as well as their mastery of irrigation systems, such as the famous Marib Dam. Religion in Arabia before Islam was diverse, reflecting the region's position as a crossroads of civilizations. Most Arabs practiced polytheism, worshipping a pantheon of tribal gods and spirits. These deities were often associated with natural forces such as the sun, moon, and stars, or specific tribes and localities. The Kaaba in Mecca was the focal point of Arabian polytheism. Housing over 300 idols, it was a pilgrimage site for tribes across the peninsula. The Quraysh profited immensely from the pilgrims who visited Mecca, reinforcing their political and economic power. Karen Armstrong writes, the tribal gods of Arabia were personal and transactional, offering protection and prosperity in exchange for rituals and offerings. They lacked the universal moral authority that characterized the monotheistic faiths of Judaism and Christianity. Alongside polytheism, monotheistic traditions existed. Jewish tribes, such as those in Yathrib, Medina, had established communities in northern Arabia, contributing to local culture through their religious texts and legal systems. Christianity, brought by Byzantine missionaries, had a foothold in regions like Najran and among the Arab tribes allied with Byzantium. Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion of the Sasanian Empire, also influenced parts of eastern Arabia. Fred Donner observes, while the majority of Arabs adhered to polytheism, the presence of monotheistic communities created a religious diversity that would shape the reception of Muhammad's message. The pre-Islamic period, often referred to by Muslims as Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance, was characterized by stark inequalities. Tribal loyalties often overrode moral considerations, and acts of generosity coexisted with practices like female infanticide. Women, while holding significant roles in Bedouin society, were often treated as property in urban centers. Marshall Hodgson highlights, the social fabric of Arabia was a tapestry of contradictions, where tribal honor dictated loyalty but also justified violence and oppression. It was a society primed for the moral and spiritual awakening that Islam would bring. Slavery was widespread, with captives from tribal wars serving as laborers or domestic servants. The absence of a unifying legal or ethical code meant that justice was arbitrary, often dictated by the powerful. Arabia's geographical position placed it at the intersection of two great empires, Byzantium to the northwest and Sasanian Persia to the northeast. These powers were engaged in prolonged conflict, draining their resources and weakening their borders. Both empires viewed Arabia as a peripheral region, important primarily for its trade routes and as a buffer zone. Karen Armstrong remarks, the political vacuum left by the disinterest of Byzantium and Persia allowed Arabia to remain independent. Its tribes largely free from external domination. This autonomy created the conditions for the emergence of a unifying force from within. The Arabian Peninsula was also deeply connected to the Indian Ocean trade network. Ports like Aden and Hormuz facilitated the exchange of goods between Africa, India, and the Mediterranean, exposing Arabia to a wide array of cultural and economic influences. Pre-Islamic Arabia was a land of diversity, contradiction, and potential. Its fragmented tribal society, spiritual pluralism, and strategic position in global trade networks created a unique environment. This was a region without a central authority, where the bonds of tribe and commerce were paramount. But it was also a land where the seeds of transformation were already sown. The stage was set for the emergence of a revolutionary message that would unite its people and reshape the world. But in the heart of this divided land, a man was about to rise, a man whose vision would unite the tribes, challenge the old ways, and spark a transformation that would echo through history. Stay with us to hear his story. Muhammad ibn Abdullah was born around 570 AD in Mecca, a thriving commercial hub controlled by the Quraysh tribe. His birth coincided with the Year of the Elephant, a time remembered for the failed invasion of Mecca by Abraha, the Abyssinian-backed Yemeni ruler. This event, steeped in both legend and historical significance, imbued the era with a sense of divine purpose. Born into the Hashim clan, a respected but not wealthy branch of the Quraysh, Muhammad faced adversity from the very beginning. His father Abdullah passed away before his birth, and at just 6 years old, Muhammad lost his mother, Amina. Orphaned, he was cared for by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, until his passing 2 years later. Muhammad then came under the protection of his uncle Abu Talib, who would play a crucial role as his guardian and ally in later years. Fred Donner, in Muhammad and the Believers, reflects, Muhammad's early years of loss and vulnerability shaped his deep empathy for the weak and marginalized, a characteristic that would later define his prophetic mission. This profound empathy, born of personal hardship, became a cornerstone of his later teachings, inspiring a commitment to justice and care for society's most vulnerable. Despite these challenges, Muhammad grew into a resilient and resourceful young man. His experiences as an orphan not only taught him self-reliance, but also fostered a deep understanding of the struggles of those on society's margins. At the age of 25, Muhammad entered into a pivotal relationship that would profoundly shape his life. Khadija, a wealthy and accomplished widow 15 years his senior, hired Muhammad to manage her trade caravans. Impressed by his character and competence, she proposed marriage. Their union was deeply harmonious and marked by mutual respect. Khadija provided Muhammad with emotional and financial stability, freeing him to pursue his spiritual inclinations. She was the first to believe in his prophetic mission, standing by him during the most challenging periods of his life. Fred Donner remarks, Khadija's unwavering support was crucial not only to Muhammad's early preaching, but to his ability to endure the hostility of Meccan society. The couple had 4 daughters and 2 sons, though both sons died in infancy. Their eldest daughter, Fatima, would later play a significant role in Islamic history as the mother of the Prophet's grandsons, Hassan and Hussein. By his late 30s, Muhammad became increasingly disillusioned with the materialism and moral decay of Meccan society. The stark inequalities, exploitation of the poor, and disregard for justice deeply troubled him. Seeking solace and clarity, he began retreating to the cave of Hira, a small cavern in the mountains outside Mecca. It was during one of these retreats in 610 AD that Muhammad experienced the event that would change his life and the course of history. The angel Gabriel appeared, commanding him to recite. Terrified and unsure of what was happening, Muhammad fled the cave, seeking comfort in Khadija. Karen Armstrong explains, the Quran's first revelation was a profound statement about the human relationship with the divine, emphasizing both humility and the transformative power of learning. Khadija reassured Muhammad of his divine calling, and her cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal, a Christian monk, affirmed that Muhammad's experience mirrored those of earlier prophets. The Quran's early revelations were poetic and urgent, addressing both spiritual and social concerns. Key themes included monotheism, tawhid, the oneness of God, rejecting the polytheistic practices of Meccan society, justice and accountability, a call for fairness and compassion, particularly for the poor, orphans, and marginalized. Judgment Day, a reminder of the ultimate accountability before God, a theme that both inspired and terrified listeners. Fred Donner writes, the Quran's early messages were radical in their simplicity. They not only challenged the religious practices of Mecca, but also threatened the social and economic order. Initially, Muhammad shared his revelations privately with close family and friends. His first followers included Khadija, Ali, his young cousin, Abu Bakr, a respected merchant, and Zayd ibn Haritha, a freed slave. As the number of believers grew, the Quraysh elite began to take notice. The Quraysh viewed Muhammad's message as a direct challenge to their power. His denunciation of idol worship threatened the pilgrimage trade, while his emphasis on social justice undermined the established hierarchies. The Quran's verses recited publicly became a rallying cry for the disenfranchised. Tariq Ramadan, in his book In the Footsteps of the Prophet, writes, Muhammad's call for justice and spiritual equality disrupted the foundations of Meccan society, directly opposing its concentration of wealth and privilege. Wael Halak, in his work Sharia, Theory, Practice, Transformations, adds, the Prophet's teachings introduced a moral framework that challenged not only the theological core of Mecca's polytheism, but also its entrenched social order. The opposition quickly turned to persecution. Converts, particularly slaves and the poor, faced brutal treatment. Bilal ibn Rabah, an Ethiopian slave who embraced Islam, was tied to the burning sand and whipped, yet he refused to renounce his faith, crying out, "One God, one God." Fred Donner observes, the courage of Muhammad's early followers in the face of relentless persecution demonstrated the strength of the Quranic message and the charisma of the Prophet. As the opposition intensified, Muhammad and his followers found themselves increasingly isolated. The Quraysh imposed a boycott on the Hashim clan, cutting off trade and social ties. These years, known as the Years of Sorrow, were marked by severe hardship, compounded by the deaths of Khadija and Abu Talib in quick succession. But as Muhammad's message spread, it began to disrupt the fabric of Meccan society. What started as quiet whispers of monotheism soon turned into a movement that challenged the powerful, threatened the status quo, and faced relentless resistance. The struggle was just beginning. The story started to get bloody. When Muhammad began his public mission in 613 AD, Mecca was unprepared for the profound challenge his message would pose. The Quraysh, who wielded immense political and economic power as the custodians of the Kaaba, initially dismissed him as a harmless preacher. However, as his followers grew in number, the implications of his teachings became clear. Muhammad's monotheistic message not only called for the worship of one God, Tawhid, but also threatened the economic and social structures that underpinned Meccan society. The Quran openly criticized idolatry, denouncing the tribal gods of Arabia as powerless and man-made. Muhammad's recitations struck at the core of Meccan identity. Fred Donner observes in his book, Muhammad and the Believers, the Quraysh recognized that Muhammad's call for monotheism was more than a theological disagreement. It was a direct challenge to the very foundation of their authority and wealth. The Kaaba, as the central shrine of Arabian polytheism, attracted pilgrims from across the peninsula. This pilgrimage trade was a major source of income for the Quraysh. A shift to monotheism, which rejected idol worship, would dismantle the economic benefits tied to these religious practices. As Muhammad's influence grew, the Quraysh's hostility intensified. Determined to suppress the nascent movement, they turned to intimidation, propaganda, and brutal violence. The early converts, drawn predominantly from society's marginalized and vulnerable groups, slaves, women, and the poor, bore the full weight of this persecution. Their defiance, however, highlighted the growing appeal of Muhammad's message, a faith rooted in equality and justice that challenged the rigid social hierarchies of Meccan society. Among the most harrowing stories of this period is that of Bilal ibn Rabah, an Ethiopian slave who embraced Islam despite the inherent dangers. His owner, enraged by his defiance, subjected him to horrific torture. Bilal was dragged to the scorching desert sands, tied down, and a heavy rock was placed on his chest, crushing him under its weight. His tormentors demanded that he renounce his faith and return to idol worship. Yet, through excruciating pain, Bilal remained steadfast, repeatedly proclaiming, "One God, one God." Hugh Kennedy, in The Prophet and the Age of the Caliphates, writes, Bilal's unwavering defiance in the face of inhuman persecution exemplified the transformative power of Muhammad's teachings, inspiring resilience among the early believers. Similarly, Jonathan Berkey, in The Formation of Islam, observes, Bilal's story symbolizes the Quranic promise of dignity and equality for all, regardless of race or status, a revolutionary concept in a deeply hierarchical society. The Quraysh leaders also sought to undermine Muhammad's reputation through slander. They accused him of being a sorcerer, a poet, or a madman, labels that carried significant stigma in Arabian culture. These accusations are reflected in the Quran. Fred Donner notes, the Quraysh's propaganda was designed not only to discredit Muhammad, but to isolate him socially and politically, cutting off his influence before it could take root. In their efforts to suppress the nascent Muslim community, the Quraysh imposed a boycott on Muhammad's clan, the Hashim. This boycott, which lasted for 3 years, prohibited marriage, trade, and social interactions with members of the clan. The sanctions aimed to pressure Abu Talib, Muhammad's uncle and protector, into withdrawing his support. The boycott forced the Hashim clan to retreat to a ravine outside Mecca known as the Shib Abi Talib. Isolated and deprived of resources, they faced starvation and extreme hardship. Reports of children crying from hunger became common, and the clan relied on occasional outside support to survive. Marshall Hodgson, in The Venture of Islam, remarks, the Quraysh's boycott was a calculated act of collective punishment aimed at breaking the unity of Muhammad's supporters. Yet, Rather than weakening their resolve, it deepened their solidarity. The death of two of Muhammad's most steadfast supporters in 619 AD marked one of the darkest periods of his life. Khadija, his wife and the first believer in his mission, passed away after years of supporting him through both personal and public struggles. Soon after, Abu Talib, his uncle and protector, also died, leaving Muhammad vulnerable to the Quraysh's aggression. Fred Donner observes, "The deaths of Khadija and Abu Talib stripped Muhammad of both emotional and political support, making him an open target for the Quraysh. Without Abu Talib's protection, the Quraysh's threats escalated. Muhammad was publicly mocked, pelted with stones, and subjected to humiliation. On one occasion, he was attacked while praying at the Kaaba with animal entrails placed on his back. Yet, despite these indignities, he remained steadfast." Karen Armstrong writes, "The year of sorrow was a time of profound loss and vulnerability for Muhammad. Yet it also demonstrated his resilience and his unwavering faith in the divine mission." Amid these hardships, Muhammad experienced a profound spiritual event known as the Isra and Mi'raj. According to Islamic tradition, he was transported from the Kaaba in Mecca to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and from there he ascended to the heavens. During this journey he met earlier prophets, including Moses and Jesus, and received the command for daily prayers. The Isra and Mi'raj reinforced Muhammad's conviction in his mission, offering a vision of divine purpose and support. Karen Armstrong describes the event as a symbolic affirmation of Muhammad's role as the final messenger, connecting his mission to the broader Abrahamic tradition. By 620 AD, it became clear that Mecca would not embrace Muhammad's message. He began seeking alliances beyond the city, traveling to nearby towns like Taif to spread Islam. However, his efforts were met with rejection, often accompanied by hostility. In Taif, he was driven out by an angry mob that pelted him with stones, leaving him bloodied and dejected. Fred Donner remarks, "The rejection at Taif was a moment of profound despair for Muhammad, yet it also demonstrated his persistence in the face of overwhelming adversity. This period of struggle set the stage for a significant breakthrough. In 622 AD, Muhammad received an invitation from the leaders of Yathrib, later Medina, to mediate their tribal disputes. This invitation marked the beginning of a new chapter in Muhammad's mission and the Islamic movement. By 622 AD, Muhammad's position in Mecca had become increasingly precarious. The death of his uncle, Abu Talib, had left him without tribal protection, and the Quraysh's opposition had escalated to assassination plots. Despite years of persistent preaching, Mecca's elite refused to accept Islam, fearing it would undermine their economic interests and social dominance. Seeking new opportunities to spread his message, Muhammad turned his attention to the oasis town of Yathrib, approximately 320 kilometers north of Mecca. Yathrib was politically fragmented, plagued by violent disputes between its two major Arab tribes, the Aws and Khazraj, and tensions with the town's Jewish tribes. Impressed by Muhammad's reputation for wisdom and fairness, Yathrib's leaders invited him to mediate their conflicts. Fred Donner in Muhammad and the Believers writes, "The invitation from Yathrib was a pivotal moment, marking the first time that Muhammad's leadership was recognized beyond the confines of Mecca. It represented a shift from persecution to the establishment of a community based on Islamic principles. Muhammad instructed his followers to migrate to Yathrib in small groups to avoid detection by the Quraysh. This migration, known as the Hijra, marked the beginning of the Islamic calendar and the transition of Islam from a persecuted movement to a cohesive socio-political force. The Hijra, the migration of Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Yathrib, later Medina, marked a pivotal moment in Islamic history. However, it was fraught with danger. The Quraysh, determined to thwart Muhammad's plans, launched a relentless effort to capture him. Under the cover of darkness, Muhammad and his closest companion Abu Bakr fled Mecca, evading their pursuers at every turn. In their escape, the two sought refuge in the Cave of Thor, located south of Mecca. For 3 tense days, they hid as Quraysh search parties combed the surrounding area. The precariousness of their situation underscored the immense risk they faced, and their survival became a defining moment in the nascent Muslim community's struggle. Hugh Kennedy, in The Prophet and the Age of the Caliphates, describes the Hijra as a turning point in the establishment of Islam, transforming it from a persecuted faith into a burgeoning political and religious movement. Jonathan Berkey, in The Formation of Islam, notes, "The Hijra was not merely an escape, but a calculated and significant step toward creating a new social and political order grounded in Muhammad's teachings." When the search parties abandoned their pursuit, Muhammad and Abu Bakr resumed their journey across the harsh terrain. Their eventual arrival in Yathrib was met with widespread enthusiasm, as its inhabitants welcomed Muhammad as both a spiritual leader and a statesman. This migration marked the establishment of the first Islamic polity, where the ideals of the new faith would begin to take shape in governance and community life. Muhammad's arrival in Yathrib marked a dramatic transformation. No longer a marginalized preacher, he now assumed the role of a statesman and leader. Yathrib was renamed Medina, Madinat al-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, and Muhammad set about creating a unified community among its diverse population. One of Muhammad's first acts as leader was to draft the Constitution of Medina, a groundbreaking document that formalized the principles of governance for the nascent Islamic State. The Constitution, which united the Muslim emigrants, Muhajirun, the local Muslim supporters, Ansar, and the Jewish tribes, emphasized mutual defense, religious freedom, and the resolution of disputes under Muhammad's authority. Key provisions of the Constitution included unity. All parties were to regard themselves as a single community, ummah, despite differences in religion or tribal affiliation. Collective defense, an attack on one group was to be regarded as an attack on all. Religious freedom. Jews were granted the right to practice their religion without interference. Leadership. Muhammad was recognized as the ultimate arbiter in disputes. Fred Donner remarks, "The Constitution of Medina was revolutionary, representing one of the earliest attempts to create a pluralistic society based on shared responsibilities and justice." The first major conflict between the Muslims and the Quraysh occurred at the Battle of Badr in 624. Muhammad, seeking to disrupt Meccan trade, led a force of 313 poorly equipped men to intercept a Quraysh caravan. The Quraysh responded by assembling an army of 1,000 to protect their interests. Despite being outnumbered, the Muslim forces achieved a stunning victory. Key factors included their superior discipline, the strategic use of terrain, and their unwavering belief in divine support. Hugh Kennedy, in The Prophet and the Age of the Caliphates, writes, "Badr was a turning point, not only because of its military significance, but because it validated Muhammad's leadership and galvanized the Muslim community." The Quraysh sought revenge the following year in 625 at the Battle of Uhud. The Muslims initially gained the upper hand, but a strategic mistake cost them dearly. A group of archers, disobeying Muhammad's orders, abandoned their position to pursue spoils, leaving the Muslim flank exposed. The Quraysh counterattacked, inflicting heavy losses. Muhammad himself was injured in the battle. Fred Donner observes, "Uhud was a painful lesson in the consequences of disunity, but it also reinforced the importance of discipline and obedience to leadership." The most dramatic confrontation came during the Battle of the Trench in 627. The Quraysh, supported by allied tribes, launched a massive siege against Medina. Muhammad, anticipating their tactics, employed an innovative defensive strategy by ordering a trench to be dug around the city, a tactic inspired by Persian warfare. The trench neutralized the Quraysh's cavalry, stalling the siege. Internal discord among the Quraysh alliance eventually forced their withdrawal, marking a decisive victory for the Muslims. Karen Armstrong writes, "The Battle of the Trench demonstrated Muhammad's adaptability and strategic brilliance, solidifying his position as both a spiritual and military leader." Beyond military conflicts, Muhammad focused on consolidating the Muslim community in Medina. His leadership emphasized justice, compassion, and the practical application of Quranic principles. Muhammad established a system of zakat, charitable giving, redistributing wealth to support the poor and vulnerable. This not only strengthened social cohesion, but also reflected Islam's emphasis on economic justice. Daily prayers, salah, fasting during Ramadan, and the observance of communal worship became central practices, fostering a shared sense of identity and purpose. Muhammad negotiated alliances with neighboring tribes, expanding Islam's influence and ensuring Medina's security. The path to the conquest of Mecca began with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, an agreement that on the surface seemed to favor the Quraysh but ultimately strengthened Muhammad's position. In 628 AD, Muhammad led a group of 1,400 Muslims on a pilgrimage to Mecca. Although the Quraysh denied them entry, negotiations resulted in a 10-year truce, allowing future pilgrimages. Key terms of the treaty were Muslims would return to Medina without completing their pilgrimage, but could return the following year. Hostilities between the Quraysh and Muslims would cease for 10 years. Other tribes were free to ally with either party, while some Muslims saw the treaty as a humiliation. Muhammad understood its strategic value. It granted legitimacy to the Muslim community and provided a period of peace during which Islam's influence could grow. Fred Donner, in Muhammad and the Believers, observes, "The Treaty of Hudaybiyah was a masterstroke of diplomacy, showcasing Muhammad's ability to prioritize long-term goals over immediate victories." The fragile truce held for 2 years until a Quraysh-aligned tribe attacked a Muslim ally, violating the treaty. This breach gave Muhammad the opportunity to take decisive action. By this time, the balance of power had shifted significantly. Islam had spread across Arabia, and Muhammad's alliances with other tribes ensured that the Quraysh were increasingly isolated. Fred Donner notes, "The Quraysh's violation of Hudaybiyah was more than a breach of contract. It was a miscalculation of the growing political and military strength of the Muslim community." In 630 AD, Muhammad assembled an army of approximately 10,000 men, a force unparalleled in Arabian history. The sheer size of this army reflected the unity and strength of the Muslim community, intimidating the Quraysh before a single blow was struck. Muhammad's approach to the conquest emphasized restraint and reconciliation. He instructed his forces to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, warning against harming non-combatants, damaging property, or desecrating religious sites. His goal was not vengeance, but the peaceful integration of Mecca into the Islamic State. Karen Armstrong, in Muhammad, A Prophet for Our Time, writes, "Muhammad's strategy during the conquest of Mecca demonstrated his commitment to building a just society, avoiding the cycles of violence that had plagued Arabian tribes for generations." As Muhammad's forces approached, the Quraysh realized they were vastly outmatched. Abu Sufyan, a key Quraysh leader, met with Muhammad and converted to Islam, securing his tribe's safety. When the Muslim army entered Mecca, it encountered little resistance. Muhammad's first act was to cleanse the Kaaba of its idols. This act symbolized the triumph of monotheism over polytheism, marking a spiritual and cultural transformation for the Arabian Peninsula. Fred Donner remarks, The conquest of Mecca was remarkable for its lack of violence, a testament to Muhammad's vision of unification rather than domination. Other than exacting retribution, Muhammad offered amnesty to the Quraysh, including many who had been his staunchest enemies. Among those pardoned were Hind bint Utbah, who had orchestrated the mutilation of Muhammad's uncle Hamza after the Battle of Uhud. Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, the son of one of Muhammad's fiercest opponents. Muhammad's words to the Quraysh reflected his commitment to reconciliation. "Go, for you are free." Karen Armstrong notes, Muhammad's clemency after the conquest of Mecca was revolutionary in a society where revenge was the norm. It exemplified the Quranic principles of forgiveness and mercy. Following the conquest of Mecca, Muhammad turned his attention to consolidating the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. Many tribes, witnessing the power and unity of the Muslim community, voluntarily embraced Islam. Others required persuasion through diplomacy or military action. Soon after the conquest, Muhammad faced a challenge from the Hawazin and Thaqif tribes in the Battle of Hunain in 630. Both tribes feared the growing influence of Islam. At the Battle of Hunain, the Muslim forces initially faltered due to an ambush, but ultimately triumphed. This victory solidified Muhammad's authority over Central Arabia. Following the Battle of Hunain, Muhammad laid siege to the city of Ta'if in 630, a stronghold of the Thaqif tribe. Although the siege was unsuccessful, the Thaqif eventually submitted peacefully, sending a delegation to Medina to embrace Islam. Fred Donner observes, the campaigns following the conquest of Mecca were less about conquest and more about integration, as Muhammad sought to create a unified polity grounded in Islamic principles. In 632, Muhammad performed his farewell pilgrimage to Mecca, delivering a sermon that encapsulated the core teachings of Islam. Addressing a crowd of over 100,000, he emphasized equality, justice, and unity. He preached about equality. No Arab has superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have superiority over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, nor does a black person have superiority over a white person, except by piety and good action. He also reflects on justice. Return the trusts to their rightful owners. Do not oppress others, and you will not be oppressed. And unity, hold fast to the Quran and my Sunnah, and you will never go astray. Karen Armstrong writes, the farewell sermon was both a reflection on Muhammad's life and a vision for the future of the Ummah, rooted in principles of justice, compassion, and faith. Shortly after returning to Medina, Muhammad fell ill. His final days were spent in the company of his closest companions, particularly Aisha, his wife. On June 8, 632, Muhammad passed away in Aisha's arms, leaving the Muslim community in a state of shock and mourning. Fred Donner reflects, Muhammad's death marked the end of an extraordinary life, but the movement he created was only beginning. His legacy would continue to shape the world for centuries to come. The final years of Muhammad's life transformed Arabia. Through diplomacy, military strategy, and moral leadership, he unified the peninsula under the banner of Islam. His emphasis on social justice, spiritual devotion, and communal solidarity laid the foundation for an empire that would soon expand across 3 continents. Marshall Hodgson, in The Venture of Islam, writes, Muhammad was not only a prophet, but a revolutionary leader whose vision redefined the social, political, and spiritual landscape of his time. So this is it for today. We've explored the traditional narrative of Islam's origins as preserved by early Islamic historians of the Abbasid era. Figures such as Ibn Ishaq, whose work was later redacted by Ibn Hisham, and al-Tabari. These sources provide an abundance of detail, offering a vivid account of Muhammad's life and the birth of Islam. However, their distance from the events they describe raises critical questions about their reliability, purpose, and historical context. We'll address these questions in detail in an upcoming video, but first, we'll delve into the fascinating history of the Rashidun Caliphate, exploring how the foundations laid during Muhammad's lifetime shaped one of the most transformative periods in history. In the meantime, we invite you to explore our other history videos. Check out our most popular video about the history of Anglo-Saxon England and another fan-favorite video on the rise of the Frankish Empire. These deep dives into the past will give you an even broader perspective on the complexities of medieval history. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on our journey through history. See you next time.